All right, let's talk about the Bible. But what if I told you that the Bible you know might be missing some books? I'm not talking about one or two. For one of the world's oldest Christian communities, the Bible isn't 66 books or even 73, it's 81. And today, we're going to explore the incredible story behind it. So I want you to just think about that for a second. What if the Bible you've seen, the one on your bookshelf, is actually incomplete? And not just by a few pages. I mean by entire books filled with stories and ideas you've never heard. 81. Let that number sink in. That's the number of books in the Holy Scripture of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian communities on the entire planet. So how in the world did they get to that number? And what does it tell us about a totally different way of seeing Scripture? Okay, so let's dive into this. An 81-book Bible. How do you even get there? What's inside this expanded library of Scripture? And more importantly, what does it teach us about history? Okay, so let's break this down. You're probably familiar with the Protestant Bible, right? 66 books. Or maybe the Catholic Bible with 73. But look at this. The Ethiopian canon, it's just different. Their Old Testament looks pretty similar to the Catholic one. But check out their New Testament. 35 books. That's 8 more than any other major Christian tradition. So what are these extra books? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. You've got books like Jubilees, sometimes called the Little Genesis because it retells those classic stories, but with all this extra detail. You have books of church order like the Didascalia. But the one we're going to zero in on today is a truly unique text, one that was totally lost to the Western world for centuries. I'm talking about the Book of Enoch. Now, I know what you might be thinking. A lost book sounds kind of like some medieval fan fiction, right? But Enoch is different. This is an incredibly ancient Jewish work, and it had a huge influence on both early Christian and Jewish thought. And you don't even have to take my word for it. The proof of its influence is right there in the standard 66-book Bible you can find anywhere. The Book of Jude directly quotes the Book of Enoch, and it treats it as real-deal prophecy. This tells us that for the earliest Christians, Enoch's writings carried some serious weight. And we now know just how ancient this text really is. I mean, for centuries, people debated it. But then, in 1947, we found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And guess what was in there? Copies of Enoch, written in Aramaic that predate Jesus. So while it was eventually left out by Rabbinic Judaism and Western Christianity, the Ethiopian church did something incredible. They preserved the entire text in their ancient language Ge'ez. So what's actually in this book that makes it so compelling? Well, it basically gives us the stunningly detailed backstory to one of the most bizarre and mysterious passages in the entire book of Genesis. Okay, look at this. On the left, you've got Genesis 6. It's super brief, kind of cryptic, right? The sons of God have kids with the daughters of humans, and boom, giants called the Nephilim show up. That's pretty much it. Now, look to the right. This is the Book of Enoch. It's a full-blown epic. We get a number. 200 of these divine beings called the Watchers. We get a specific location, Mount Hermon. We even get a conspiracy as they all swear this oath to go through with it together. It's a completely different level of detail. And it just keeps going. Enoch explains that the great corruption that led to Noah's flood, it wasn't just humans being bad. No, it was kicked off by these fallen angels. They're the ones who taught humanity forbidden knowledge, how to make weapons, sorcery, even things like cosmetics. And their giant offspring, they started literally devouring everything and everyone, basically forcing God's hand to hit the reset button with the flood. So this raises a huge question for scholars. For centuries, the assumption was that Enoch was just some later, creative riff on the Genesis story. But now that we know how old it is, what if it's the other way around? What if the story in Enoch is the older, more detailed original, and the version we have in Genesis is actually a heavily censored summary? And the answer to that question reveals something absolutely fundamental about why the Ethiopian Bible is so different. It forces us to completely rethink what the word canon, the official collection of scripture, even means. And here is the absolute key to the whole thing. To understand the 81-book Bible, you have to let go of our modern Western way of thinking about it. As the scholar Brooke Asale puts it, the very idea of a canon as a strict, closed-off list of books, that whole concept might be totally alien to how the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition sees it. Let's break that down, because it's important. The Western view generally sees the canon as a fixed list. It's like a club with a bouncer. A book is either in or it's out, and the list is sealed. But the Ethiopian Orthodox Tawahedo Church, or EOTC, they see canon more as a rule of faith. For them, an ancient book is considered authoritative if its teachings line up with the church's core beliefs and traditions. It's less about a rigid checklist and way more about theological consistency. And this is why, and get this, even though the number 81 is super important and revered, different published versions of the Ethiopian Bible over the last 100 years have actually had slightly different lists of books inside. And yet, they're all considered authoritative. The tradition is fluid, you see. It's guided by faith, not by a static table of contents. So what's the big takeaway here? Why does this unique 81-book Bible really matter to us today? Well, because it offers us this incredible, almost unbelievable window into a world of thought that was nearly lost forever. Think about it. For centuries, through isolation and just sheer dedication, the Ethiopian church basically acted as a time capsule. It preserved an entire library of ancient Jewish literature that shapes the world of the New Testament writers, literature that was then forgotten by pretty much everyone else. So what do we gain from this? By studying their canon, we get a much clearer picture of the incredibly diverse Jewish beliefs floating around before and during the time of Jesus. We understand weird quotes and allusions in the New Testament a whole lot better. It totally challenges our modern idea of the Bible as this single standardized book. And, maybe most importantly, it's a powerful reminder that history is preserved in many traditions, not just the one we might be most familiar with. And that leaves us with one last lingering thought. The Ethiopian canon shows us that an entire library of ancient ideas can be saved by a single tradition. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other ancient perspectives, what other forgotten stories are still out there, just waiting for us to rediscover them?